it's Dr. Phil here. Welcome back to Mystery and Murder, where we unearth the chilling truths lurking behind headline-making cases, venturing deep into the lives of victims and suspects that have captivated the public. On today's episode, we'll delve into the infamous Cleveland kidnapping case, where three young women, Michelle Knight, Amanda Berry, and Gina DeJesus, were abducted and held captive by a man named Ariel Castro for over a decade. Their ordeal, marked by their unimaginable abuse and resilience, lasted from 2002 until their courageous escape in 2013. We'll explore the depths of their suffering, the strength that sustained them, and the eventual downfall of their twisted captor. In 2013, I had the profound honor of interviewing Michelle Knight, where she courageously chose to share her harrowing experience for the first time ever. Her story was pivotal, not only because it showcased Michelle's remarkable bravery, but also because we were able to raise awareness and offer hope to other victims of sexual and domestic violence. Now, on that note, I have to warn you that these next episodes will contain highly sensitive topics, including sexual assault and violence and otherwise truly inhumane behavior. However, at its heart, this is a story about having the will to survive against all odds. So I hope you'll join me as we take you through this case, much of it through Michelle's perspective. In our first episode, we'll discuss Michelle's backstory and abduction, as well as an analysis of Ariel Castro and what I believe led him down this dark path. And when I talk about people like this, my goal is to truly take you inside their head, inside their thinking, and let you know what makes them do the things that they do. As I've said before, people often ask me, who does that kind of thing? But when they ask me, it's not a rhetorical question. They really want to know, and I really want to answer for you everything that I understand about what makes someone like that do what they do. It's like I want to unscrew the top of their head and let you look down inside, however scary that might be. Maybe show you something, teach you something, share with you something that could be life-saving going forward. Because these, quote, monsters, as some people call them, don't necessarily look any different than everybody else. And they truly walk among us. In the grocery store, on the street, at the car wash, in the movies. They do walk among us. It's important to note that Michelle now goes by the name Lily Rose, a name that reflects her newfound healed sense of self. And while I truly want to honor that, for the sake of clarity in discussing this case, we will refer to her by her former name during that time, Michelle. Now, during our interview, Michelle sat on the couch across from me, legs crossed. At under 5 feet tall, with a shock of dyed red hair and numerous new piercings, it struck me how physically vulnerable yet strong she appeared. It would soon become evident that inside the petite woman in front of me was an absolute warrior. Michelle's story was an emotional one. Even before that fateful day she was kidnapped, according to Michelle, her life was filled with adversity. Born into a low-income household, Michelle ran away after suffering sexual abuse at the hands of a relative. Her dad finally sent her to school, where she got pregnant and delivered a baby boy. Now, I have to add, just like I did in my initial interview over a decade ago, that Michelle's mother denied Michelle's version of her childhood, stating that she felt Michelle was, quote unquote, confused due to her traumatic decade in captivity. Regardless, we do know that Michelle loved her baby son. She told me he was the light of her life, her reason for living. But one night after her mother's boyfriend allegedly came home drunk and injured her son's leg, Child Services took the boy away. This devastated Michelle, who told me she had tried desperately to be a good mother. In fact, coincidentally and tragically, on the very day Michelle was kidnapped, she was walking to an appointment with social services to discuss what she would have to do to gain back custody of her son. I returned to the scene of the crime in Cleveland with Michelle retracing her steps on the day when she was abducted and vanished from the world. A world that once she knew, even as painful as it was. Take a listen to my initial interview with Michelle Knight, Part 1. Okay, Michelle, we're at the dollar store on Clark Street, right?
Mm-hmm.
What happened here?
This is where I was abducted from.
And you live about how far from here, your house at the time?
Right down a block.
And you had walked from there and you were going to check on the custody issue with your son, right?
Yes.
You got lost.
I proceeded to walk through this door.
Okay.
And
you went inside here.
Yeah.
And is that where you were overheard?
Yes.
So we now know that he overheard you asking for direction.
Yeah. And then the guy that was right beside me, he was like, well, I know where that's at. And I knew him because of Emily, which is his daughter. So I got in the car and I told him where I was going. And he said, okay, well, I gotta drop off at the house to make sure the puppies are okay. So I was like, all right, I'll sit in the car, you check them.
Now let's talk about Ariel Castro and how he seized upon his opportunity to abduct Michelle. If you've been following along with Mystery and Murder, you know a few episodes ago I discussed the Ted Bundy case where my guest Rhonda recounted her terrifying abduction. Bundy was a calculated, methodical predator. He was like a chess player, and he was usually a few moves ahead. By contrast, Ariel Castro was very different. Though he seemed to have a deep hatred of women, and a hatred that was escalating, this particular abduction appeared to be truly, and sadly for Michelle, a crime of opportunity, a completely impulsive act by a depraved man who saw the perfect moment to satisfy his twisted need for dominance. And when he saw that opportunity, he took it. When you hear police and profilers talk about a crime of opportunity, this is what they mean. He didn't necessarily enter that situation with the plan to abduct Michelle, but when the opportunity presented itself, his lack of impulse control and his lack of empathy, his inability to stand in the shoes of his victim and feel what that person might feel, the pain, the fear, the terror, in that doesn't register with him, he just moves on his own impulse without regard for the impact. Later, Michelle would realize that his house had been carefully arranged to imprison someone as if he had been lying in wait, ready to strike the moment the opportunity presented itself. And to that extent, there was premeditation. To that extent, he did have pre-planning. To that extent, he was someone lying in wait, but that doesn't mean he planned for this victim at this place at this time. It was still a crime of opportunity, even though his lair was prepared for a victim. That day, he just spotted Michelle, petite, vulnerable, and in need of help. She was lost, looking for directions, and he took advantage of her at that moment. Coming up, Michelle finds herself hanging in a dark room, unsure if she'll live to see another day. What did Ariel Castro say and do in those first horrifying hours of captivity? War in Iran is rattling global markets. Oil's surging, inflation looms, and economic uncertainty threatens your savings. If Iran blocks the Strait of Hormuz, prices could soar and your money could lose value fast. So don't wait and hope. I trust Preserve Gold to help protect my wealth, and it's the only precious metals firm I recommend to family, friends, and you. Their integrity and expertise give me peace of mind. Secure what you've earned now with a partner you can trust. Text Dr. Phil to 50505 to get your free precious metals guide from Preserve Gold. Gold prices are already breaking records, and with analysts predicting more gains ahead, you cannot afford to wait. As a bonus, you can get up to $15,000 in free silver with a qualified purchase. Text Dr. Phil to 50505 now before the next shock hits. Now, one of the many unsettling aspects of this case is that Michelle knew Ariel Castro's oldest daughter, Emily. So she was familiar with the Castro name, and that gave her a sense of comfort. Imagine that, someone that you have at least a loose connection to, the father of an acquaintance offering you a ride when you need one. It wouldn't immediately cause alarm bells to go off. It wasn't like, here's some stranger saying, hey, little girl, would you like a ride? That wasn't what happened here. This was someone that was in her orbit. She knew of him and knew his daughter. Then to further gain his trust, Castro claimed he just needed to stop by the house to check on some puppies. I mean, come on, in 2020 hindsight, this seems maybe as stereotypical as some guy at the playground in a trench coat saying, hey, little girl, would you like some candy? My puppy's lost, can you help me look? I mean, we all know that, it's stereotypical, but at the time, when you're distraught and you're going to see your social worker to see if you can figure out how to get your son back, and you don't know where to go, and you're desperate and you're upset, and here's the father of a friend. He's giving you a ride. Once you're in the car, he says, it's kind of on the way, I just need to stop and check on the puppies. It was a seemingly harmless excuse. After all, who wouldn't want to see a few adorable puppies? It made him appear non-threatening, reinforcing this illusion that everything was okay, it's safe. And then, the moment of no return, Michelle got into his car. And that's when the real danger began. With Castro behind the wheel, he was in complete control of little Michelle, who, as I said, is under 5 feet tall. And she unknowingly embarked on a nightmare that would last almost 11 years. Now, think about that for a second. She gets in a car thinking it will be maybe a 2 or 3 minute ride. And the next free breath she would take, the next breath of fresh air she would breathe, would be almost 11 years later. When they pulled up to the house, Michelle thought, you'd be fine. She had made it clear that she would stay in the car while Castro went inside. She had to get to social services, and she didn't want to be delayed any further. Her sole focus was going to her appointment to go fight to get her son back. Of course, Castro had other, more sinister plans in mind. When they pulled up to his rundown house on Seymour Avenue, Castro coaxed Michelle inside. tempting her with the promise of a puppy she could bring home for her young son.
So I said, okay.
How did you go in?
Into the back door.
So no one ever could see you going in the front door?
No. But I did poke my head out and I saw a bunch of people that lived in the previous house next to him.
Okay.
And I waved hi to them.
Did they wave back?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
I looked around in the house and I didn't hear any whining, so I started to get a little nervous. Then he was like, well, the puppies are upstairs. And I was like, I'm not going upstairs with you. He was like, well, if you want the puppy, you will come up. I finally gave in. I was like, okay, I'll go upstairs with you. And then I seen Emily's picture. I was like, ah, that's Emily. And I was like, is she here? And he was like, yeah, she's here. She's just right downstairs. So I was like, okay. So we go in there, we look for the puppies. The puppies are not there. So he trapped me in a room.
And how did he trap you at that moment?
He already had it set up to where he could tie me to the, I think it's like a clothesline type of thing.
And did he tie you to this?
Yes.
Did you have any idea when you walked through that door that it would be 11 years before you would walk back out it?
No.
Could you have ever dreamed or imagined as you stepped through that door that you would not breathe that air again for 11 years?
No.
This is only the beginning of Michelle's story, and it's already a complete nightmare. From the very first moments of their encounter, Castro was manipulating Michelle into doing what he wanted until she was completely incapacitated. Now, let's talk about how she was manipulated step by step. First, she voices she wants to stay in the car. Now, she was very one-dimensional at this point. She has one thing on her mind, and that is get to the people she needs to talk about to get her son back. His response is just to cajole her, no, come inside, the puppies are in there. And she gets inside, she does not want to go upstairs with him. That feels off to her. He again pressures her, while also falsely assuring her, hey, that's where the puppies are. The main thing that made Michelle feel safe in this situation was seeing her friend Emily's picture in the house. And then Castro says, yes, Emily's here. She's here, we're not alone. Emily's here. He was lying, of course, but seeing that photo of her friend once again kept Michelle's worries at bay. It's twofold. What father of someone you know is going to harm you? How would he explain that to his daughter? And from a practical standpoint, you'd think that Castro would have been too scared to do something to Michelle because she knew Emily. But that wasn't the case. Once Castro trapped Michelle in this dark, dingy room, I mean, to look at the photos of it, it was a cluttered, terrifying looking space. Exactly what you'd picture a captive's room to be. He tied her up. I'll never forget what Michelle told me next. It's downright chilling.
I was tied up like a fish, an ornament on the wall. That's the only way I can describe it. I was hanging like this, my feet, and I was tied by my neck and my arms with the extension cord going like that.
Oh my God. So he tied your hands and feet and also around your neck and hung you from this rod?
Yes.
Did you fight him at the time?
At the time, no, because I was shocked.
You panicked, just froze?
Yeah, and the only thing I can do is cry, begging him, let me go back to my son.
What did you say to him?
I said, please don't do this to me. And he said, I can. You can't take me back. And and then he threw money at me.
What was the significance of him throwing money at you?
He was obsessed with prostitutes. And also he thought I was a 13-year-old prostitute. When he found out my real age, he got mad.
Why did that anger him? He wanted a child?
Yes.
Immediately upon her capture, Castro sexually assaulted and physically abused Michelle. And what you heard is only the start of her 11-year duration of torture at his hands. While I'm certain we all agree this man, if we can even call him that, since he's clearly a despicable excuse for a human being, is sick and deranged, we still need to look at his warped psyche. What mental issues made this man want to keep women imprisoned and abuse them so mercilessly? To fully grasp the horror of his crimes, we have to delve into the twisted mind behind these acts. Who is Ariel Castro? He was born in Puerto Rico in 1960. He's just a kid. His parents divorced. He moved with his mother and siblings to the States, originally to Reading, Pennsylvania. Now, allegedly, he was sexually and physically abused throughout his childhood. Now, don't believe what you hear that those that are abused, abuse. Those that are molested, molest. That is true in some cases, but it is not a given, and it's damn sure not an excuse. It's said that he was molested starting at the age of 5 by a neighbor in Puerto Rico and was also raped by an uncle. His mother had allegedly physically abused him as well. It was said that she would strike him with belt sticks and an open hand. Once an adult and a married man, Castro's home life was turbulent. It's reported that he physically abused his wife, Grimelda, throughout their marriage. His own daughter, Emily, would later corroborate that her father routinely abused her mother, in fact, so badly that she had numerous serious injuries. Now, Castro was accused of beating Grimelda once while she was in the process of recovering from brain surgery. During the incident, Emily Castro said she jumped on her father's back, stabbing him with a pencil in an effort to get him to stop. And he was arrested following that incident, but the charges were later dropped. Despite the violence that Castro allegedly aimed at her mother, Emily said he never abused her or her siblings. She said her father doted on his daughters and, in fact, was overprotective. It's possible that he was overprotective because he knew what he was capable of and therefore might be sensitive to what others were capable of. He insisted the girls cover up in public, wearing shorts under their skirts and t-shirts over their bathing suits. Castro, she said, even insisted his daughters shower with underwear on when he was in the house. Now, Freud would explain that as a defense mechanism called reaction formation. That when you're one way, you react to the extreme in another direction, to react against your tendencies, to protect against those tendencies. If that's true, and I'm not a big Freudian, I can tell you for sure, but that's one that does make sense. People overreact against their own tendencies that they're trying to cover up. In 1996, amidst her husband's relentless abuse, Grimelda finally moved out of what would later become the infamous Kidnap House and took custody of their daughters. This is a terrifying detail. Not only did one of Castro's beatings cause his wife to get a blood clot in her brain, it actually turned into an inoperable tumor which later claimed her life. And before her life tragically ended, Castro continued to torment her for leaving him, threatening and attacking her throughout the years. So much so that she filed a restraining order against him, but it eventually expired. In terms of a career, Castro was a total failure. He worked as a school bus driver, of course, let's put him around children more, until he was later fired in November of 12 for bad judgment. Some of these bad judgments included making an illegal U-turn with infants and toddlers on his bus, using his bus to go grocery shopping, leaving a child on the bus while he went for lunch at Wendy's, and leaving the bus unattended while he took a nap at home. Now, again, what does that tell you about his makeup? A complete lack of empathy. He doesn't think about what his actions have to do in terms of impact on other people. He doesn't think about that. If he has an impulse, he acts on it. He doesn't consider the danger to other people. He doesn't consider how this might affect someone else, because it doesn't matter to him. He doesn't care. And he doesn't have the ability to put himself in their shoes and consider what it might make them feel or what his actions might do to them. So what we have here is an erratic, highly violent man prone to impulsive decision-making and reckless behavior without any regard for how it might affect or impact someone else. He sees things only through his eyes, considers only his point of view, and does not take into account anyone else's thoughts, feelings, fears, pain. None of that registers with him. This will prove to be a central element in this case. Yet time and time again, he faced little more than a slap on the wrist from the law. What does that tell you about our system and how it failed these three young women that would be kidnapped by him? He exhibited clear sociopathic tendencies. Just no consideration for pain he was inflicting on others, only his own twisted impulse gratification. There's also this contradiction that was within him. On the one hand, he was a sexual predator, preying on and terrorizing women, subjecting them to horrific abuse. On the other hand, according to his oldest daughter, Emily, he played the role of the overprotective father, obsessively guarding his daughter's so-called virtue. Why would he do this? Well, is it reaction formation? Is it what we call in psychology undoing? You do all this to others, and then you dote on and take great care with your own daughters as a way of balancing the ledger. Like, I do all these horrible things out here, but look at what a great protective father I am. It kind of erases all of that because you do such a good job here. And in his twisted way, that kind of balances things out. And he certainly knew from his own conduct and behavior what some men were capable of. He knew, if I can do it, others can, so I better be watching out. It was definitely an attempt to separate his two identities, the father and the predator. And we've seen this with a lot of kidnapping, raping murderers who live double lives. We'll talk about that as we move forward. Now let's assume for a moment that the accounts of Ariel Castro's troubled childhood are true. And it's crucial to emphasize that experiencing physical or sexual abuse as a child, as I said, is not an excuse. It's not even a reason to grow up and do monstrous things. the idea that the victims of abuse are destined to become abusers themselves, as I said, is just not true. That is a harmful and misleading myth. And if Castro was subjected to abuse, it's possible that it shaped his warped perception of power and control, because sometimes, if you're subjected to that, if you are abused or molested and you can't fight back, there are instances where people wait until they're the one in power and then they vent. Now they wield the power and they become bullies, they become abusers, they become molesters. That is true in some cases, but it neither excuses it nor does it explain why they do it. It's just one explanation. Had it become learned behaviors? Was it his perceived framework for just how you interact with the world? Well, there are an awful lot of people that go through what he had gone through, reportedly, that don't behave that way. He did not break the cycle. He just continued it. That's a choice. Was it a harder choice for him? Maybe, but it was still a choice. I was raised by an alcoholic that was at times violent and abusive, and I chose to not drink, even though I'm genetically predisposed to it. So it's harder for me. I'm more susceptible. I'm more at risk for alcoholism. It was a choice. Maybe harder for me to make than those who aren't genetically predisposed to it, but it was a choice and I made it. So I haven't had a drink in 60 years because my children have never seen me drink. Every year or two, I remind them that they're genetically predisposed to it. Since they've never seen me do it, I don't want it to sneak up on them. Hey, just because you have never seen me drink, don't forget you're genetically predisposed to this. It's just a choice. I made it, he could have made it, as can everyone else. He definitely had a contempt for women, an arrogant, belligerent contempt for women. He also displayed narcissism. As I said, the lack of empathy, seeing things only from his point of view. And you mix what I believe was toxic narcissistic behavior with sociopathic tendencies. And we'll define all this as we go along. But narcissism, you see things only from your point of view. You think you're special. You think rules don't apply to you. And sociopathic, lack of empathy, no feelings of remorse, entitlement. You mix those two together, this was someone I believe we can also deem as a sexual sadist. And sexual sadism, these people repeatedly and intentionally inflict suffering on a non-consenting individual, fantasizing about or having intense urges to cause suffering to others. And they act on those urges when their partner doesn't consent, and they have significant distress or impairment in social, occupational, or other areas of their lives because these impulses are so powerful. They view others as objects without feelings or emotions. They're just there to be used. They sometimes use charm to manipulate or deceive others, but they don't have any remorse for hurting anybody. That's just a means to an end for them. They could care less about the impact. And let me tell you, that is a terribly dangerous combination of characteristics: narcissism, sociopathy, and sexual sadism. That is not somebody you want to spend the evening with. There's still so much more to uncover about the horrors Castro inflicted on Michelle and his other victims in the years that follow. But before we go any further, it's important to understand exactly who we're dealing with. We're talking about a man capable of committing some of the most unspeakable crimes against women. Because you understand, this is a man that is totally focused on self-gratification. He thinks he is entitled to it. You know, I said I want to unscrew the top of his head and look down in there, and when you look down in there, you see somebody that is arrogant. He is belligerent. He hates women, and he thinks they are there for his entertainment. The thought that he could be hurting them or hurting their feelings or scaring them, terrorizing them, those are concepts that you and I are talking about. This is not a conversation he's ever had with himself. Now, he may have it in protecting his daughters, but so far as he is concerned, it never even occurs to him. When he takes Michelle out of that dollar store and gets her in his car and then in his house and up those stairs, his daughters don't even exist in his consciousness. He doesn't think this is like somebody's daughter. This could be happening to Emily. He doesn't say, I can't do this. This is somebody's daughter. No. She's there for his gratification. She is a thing. And that's all he thinks about. Which means you could stay there for a day, a week, a month, a year, or 11 years. And at no time will he ever have a fit of consciousness. At no time will he ever say, you know what? This is terrible that I'm doing this. I feel sorry for her. Now, it's hard to imagine that a human being is capable of such indifference. But as this story unfolds, you're going to see someone that not only is capable of such indifference, but he will actually toy with Michelle and these other two and tease and hurt them further. Why? One explanation is sex, but the truth is, it's about power. And you would think, how could someone in a broken down, dilapidated house with not enough money to even more than barely get by, be on a power trip? Well, when you're arrogant, belligerent, and narcissistic, you live in a world of your own. And we're going to explore that world some more in our next episode, because Michelle discovers Castro's sinister plan to abduct more victims, and soon she is joined in captivity by Amanda Berry and Gina De Jesus. How did these young women endure years of unimaginable torment? And what plans did Castro have in store for these women? How did Castro manage to keep them imprisoned in plain sight for how long? When you see the street where he lived, how close these houses are together, what were the neighbors thinking? How do you keep 3 women imprisoned when there are neighbors? You could reach out and touch the houses. People walking by the sidewalk out front. People mowing their yards. And finally, how did they finally break free? All of that and more on the next episode of Mystery and Murder. I'm Dr. Phil. If you or someone you know has been sexually assaulted, know that you can reach out to the National Sexual Assault Hotline at 1-800-656-HOPE. That's 1-800-656-4673. This hotline is operated by RAINN, RAINN, and connects you with local sexual assault service providers who can offer free, confidential support and resources. And when you call this number, nobody's going to pressure you to do anything until you're ready. They will listen, they will be supportive, and be there for you. That's 1-800-656-HOPE, 1-800-656-4673. I'll see you next time.